over here to where Edge was, where we put all that in, it says unable to live stream to the customer service, update the streaming route.
Close, just go back to YouTube real quick. I mean, it looks like you're live now.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, it looks like we're
I
live.
think you're live. Let me double check.
We're live.
Double checking is always the best. So where can I find these archived if I want to go look at them?
They're on the Tompkins County YouTube channel,
Okay.
and they're all
Yeah.
by, okay, we're live. We're ready to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording.
Yeah, it should be,
It didn't tell us it's recorded.
yeah, record to the cloud.
That's what I was.
Okay, we're ready to go.
Unless Rod can't hear us.
Michael Murphy added in. I see his name. I know you've added him 3 times.
Okay, can you hear us? Are you ready?
I was having technical difficulties.
Okay.
I can hear you now. You can hear
Okay,
me?
we're-
Okay. What
All
can-
right.
Good to go.
Okay. Welcome to the
Yeah,
Tompkins County Council of Governments meeting for March 23rd, 2023. Are there any additions to the agenda that people know of? If something comes up, we can always add something. I believe we have some visitors did our visitors show up in the legislative chambers?
Yes.
Maybe they can introduce themselves. So I believe,
I'll introduce myself. Hi, my name is Peter Criswell, and I'm a legislator from Ulster County, New York. I represent a portion of the city of Kingston, and I'm in my 2nd term, currently running for a 3rd term. And I was actually very interested. I'm just visiting Ithaca, just on holiday, but I was really interested in the concept of a county council of governments. We don't have one, and so I just wanted to sit in on the meeting and eavesdrop a little bit and see how it works, and maybe take this information back to Ulster County. So thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it.
You picked a good meeting because we're looking at our bylaws. You get a copy of our bylaws.
Oh, good. Thank you.
so welcome. I know we said, do you really want to come up in person? We can send you a Zoom link, but you really wanted to be in person. So I'm sorry that most of us are on Zoom, but welcome. So the first item of business is approving the minutes from January 26, 2023. Is there someone who would like to move? Shauna, is there a second? Cynthia, I saw Cynthia's hand first. Any discussion about the minutes, Joel?
I just had one question. How many members are there to TCOG?
There are 17 municipalities, so we have 17 members. It's either your primary member or your alternate. So we need 9 for quorum.
That's
And
what I was wondering about, yeah. Because I think I said in the minutes you needed 12.
we need 12 to change. We need 12 in person to change the bylaws.
Will we
That'll
need
be
12 in person?
We will need 12 in person.
And they need to be handed out a month in advance as well.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, the math didn't seem to add up to me, but.
Any other comments about the January minutes?
Mhm.
All those in Yeah. favor, raise your hand or
Wait,
say
wait,
aye.
wait, wait.
Anyone?
Wait,
Bob?
Bob Lynch here. Just a couple minor.
Oh, sorry, Bob, I didn't see your hand there.
Okay, a couple minor clerical changes on page 4 of the minutes under emergency planning and preparedness, line 2. Underway should be 1 word and not 2 words, underway. And also on page 4, under the transportation category, it should probably start with Mr. Lynch provided a brief update, because it doesn't identify who provided the update. And that's it.
And Shauna and Cynthia, you're fine with those minor changes? Okay, I think we can now vote. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Anyone abstaining?
I think we need to wait instead of raising.
Anyone opposed? Okay, they're carried. Moving on to report from county administration, Lisa.
Thanks, Rod. Just a brief report this month. Probably members of this group are aware, but I'll just state that the county is very concerned about the governor's proposal to intercept the federal Medicaid program funding and keep it at the state level that has been allotted to counties for several years. In Tompkins County, that looks like it would have a mid-year impact in 2023 of at least $600,000. And for 2024, more like 1.5 million, which is the equivalent of a 3% tax levy increase. It's our understanding that that this is a change in interpretation of the federal Affordable Care Act, and what that legislation, the interpretation of that, which we certainly interpret that funding is allotted to states and counties for their shares of the Medicaid costs. But the governor is now choosing to interpret that it goes directly and only to the state. So, and that is difficult because this isn't necessarily a budget proposal in the governor's budget that the state legislature can then take out. It's a change in legal interpretation. So while our state senator and assemblywoman are sympathetic and oppose this increase, they can't take legislative action to change it. So we've been focusing our advocacy efforts with the governor and with our federal senators, but we also, get word from NISAC that this is there has not been movement to date by the governor's office on this issue. So we're very concerned about this. So that is certainly will certainly impact how we approach the 2024 budgeting process and the putting together our fiscal targets for 2024. So that's one update. On another note, there are several executive level searches currently underway at the county, and hopefully by the next, well, certainly by the next TCOG meeting, hopefully within the next month, we'll be able to announce where we're at, or some the finalists for those or the incumbents for those positions, but we're right in the middle of them right now. And then finally, it's the time of year where we will be convening a shared services panel to have a conversation and identify any potential projects to submit for New York State for the Shared Services Initiative. So Bridget Nugent, our Deputy County Administrator, will be sending out communication from our office to coordinate our first meeting in mid to late April to provide an overview of that initiative and share about the process and hear about any thoughts if we have any shared services to consider for the application this year. Happy to answer any questions.
Mark, did I see your hand?
Sure. Lisa, who's the ultimate authority on the interpretation of the Affordable Care Act in regard to the Medicaid? Does the governor's office just decide? How does that work?
So I think right now they are asserting their authority as the interpreter of that, and what's then left to interpretation is whether or not there is sufficient grounds for counties to sue the governor or to sue the state to reclaim these funds.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for Lisa? Cynthia.
I would like to learn more about the shared services panel. And I hope in that email that's going to be coming up, if there could be a description of what exactly would be included in a possible application.
Sure,
Thank
we'd be happy to lay that out. And I think in the first meeting, we'll provide that overview for anyone that's new to the table on it.
Thank you. And all members of TCOG will be invited to that, I'm presuming.
Yep, sure.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else for Lisa? Mike? And you're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I
Okay.
just got off it. What is the justification the governor has for taking the money away? I mean, that seems like a radical thing to me. So how's she justifying it?
Well, I think what we've heard from our colleagues at NISAC, the State Association of Counties, is that the state is at the limit of its federal Medicaid cap. So they have a cap on spending, and they're out of money. And so they need funding, and this is the way for them to receive the funding. At the same time, I always like to say the counties are mandated to pay these costs, but we have no control over how the money is spent or whether costs are contained. And at the same time that these funds are going to be intercepted from counties, there are expansions in the Medicaid program itself. So there are simultaneous a money grab and no cost containment, and in fact expansion of the program. So it's really using the property taxes and the county tax base to make up the difference in the cost in the balance of paying for the Medicaid program on the state level.
Okay. Anything else for Lisa? Then moving on to a couple of reports from the Tompkins County Planning and Sustainability Department. So Megan, are you first?
I am. I'm substituting for Elliot, who had a little family emergency today. So I'm here to talk about the county's Housing and Supportive Infrastructure Grant. And I will digress for a quick minute to say hello to Peter, because some of the staff in our department has been talking with Ulster counterparts in Ulster County about housing and sustainability and other efforts. So great to have you visit, and hope others do as well. But I am here to let you know that the Housing and Supportive Infrastructure Grant Program is now open and officially taking applications. So any municipality is welcome to apply. And these grants can be used, they provide up to 90%, so a minimum of a 10% match from the municipality side for activities that can help support housing affordability in your communities. And oftentimes these grants max out at $10,000. I will say we have $15,000 in our budget this year total. And, considering, what to talk with the legislature about going forward. But these grants can be used to supplement staff hours or provide a consultant time to help, say, develop a grant application, to look at some aspect of your zoning, things that can help with the affordability of housing in your communities. So we've seen past applicants do everything from, housing conditions, like seeking out grant funding for housing condition surveys and pursuing rehabilitation grants for homes in their communities, traffic studies that are necessary to allow future phases of development. Things like that. And so Elliot Benman, our Housing and Community Development Planner in the Planning and Sustainability Department, is officially administering that program. So you're welcome to reach out to him. There's a link in your packet as well to all the information, and an easy online application process. And we are, taking applications as they come until September 25th this year. And we are reviewing these on the first Tuesday of every month.
So is it possible you're making decisions as you get the applications coming in?
We are. So if
Okay.
you've got a great idea, we highly suggest, starting to put that together. The other tidbit I will share, although don't quote me on this, to New York State, is we've heard rumor that there's an expectation that the Community Development Block Grant CDBG funding round, specifically for housing activities, is probably going to be announced around May. Probably with a deadline July or August. And so if your community is thinking about applying for a grant through that program, it's great to, start having conversations if you're thinking about working with a consultant, having that initial phone call with a few to see who might, best kind of match with your needs. And we do also keep a list, although we don't endorse any particular consultant. If that's what you're seeking, we try to keep an active list of anybody we know of that's operating in our area.
So questions for Megan? Okay.
All right, thank you.
And then an update on the building code administration and operations study. So Darby, I'm assuming that's you.
That is me. Thanks, Rod. Hi, everyone. Darby Kiley here from the Planning and Sustainability Department. I'll put in a plug for another grant opening that we have now. It's been open for a few weeks now, and that's the Municipal Parks and Trails Grant Program. And that one has a deadline that's April 17th, and I'll put a link in the chat to the guidelines for that. So that's up to $5,000. And we got the announcements out a few weeks ago, but if anyone hasn't heard about that and has questions, you're welcome to follow up with me on it. And now I'm going to transition to the building code administration study to get everybody set up and reorganized here. And let me go screen. You got that in full screen now?
Yes.
Great. Thanks. So many of you were at the roundtable that was held with our consultants, LaBerge Group, back on May 2nd, but I just wanted to provide a more comprehensive overview of what they're doing, but actually keep it pretty short, just to let you know where we are in the process and where we're going from here. So the overview of the project itself, we have 4 tasks within the scope. So we're just at the beginning here in task 1, where we're collecting data, doing surveys, and holding the interviews and roundtables. So I want to thank you all for your participation, both in the surveys and the roundtables. I know not everybody was able to attend those, but appreciate all the input that we've gotten through this process so far. So the consultants are pulling all that information together in task 1, and that's what I'll go through today. After that, they'll take all the information that they gathered and have a pretty broad list of all the opportunities that were identified for shared services, collaboration, and that kind of thing. And then they'll take that longer list and pull it down into a smaller selected shared services that they'll develop more details in. So whether there's something that will require an intermunicipal agreement or some other background information, that would all be pulled together as part of task 3. And then the final task are the draft report, outreach to stakeholders, and a final report. And so this will be, this includes the due dates, so it'll be wrapping up in early November. So here we are in task 1. The written surveys were due a couple months ago. We had these roundtable discussions earlier this month. The consultants are developing the summary of all those current conditions. So I'll just talk about the strengths and challenges that they've identified and some of the emerging strategies that they see coming out of this. And again, there'll be a task 1 deliverable in probably in early April, and then the steering committee that's working on this will take a look at that in mid to late April. So thanks to you and your staff, we identified a number of strengths. I mean, what people really see with the code enforcement within the county is that people like that there's a local service provided. I think the concern about something that would be consolidated would be that your constituents don't know who they're working with. They don't feel like that local knowledge would be available. So I think that's really a strength that each of the communities showed in the surveys and in the roundtables. And then, however you know about the work of the code enforcement officer, but they do share a lot. They talk to one another. They have some semi-regular meetings that they are able to share ideas, and this really came out. I know LaVerge talked about this during the roundtable discussions with the code enforcement officers. It was a 2-hour schedule with a lunch. They went for 2.5 hours. We almost had to kick them out because we had another group coming in. So it was really good to just feel their collegiality, and just have them sharing a lot of information with the consultants. But a number of challenges that you guys have identified, code enforcement officers identified as well. A lot has to do with the staffing. So the succession planning, Mark Whitmer has had a vacancy for a long time, and that created this long backlog of just inputting information, and there's papers to sort through. So just the staffing side of it has really been identified as a challenge, as well as the expanding workload. So the building code, for good reasons, gets updated very frequently, but that's a lot for a code enforcement officer to be tracking and trying to get all the information digested and know how to implement that is a challenge for them. And then they see that on the contractor side of things. So, how much are contractors keeping up with building code changes? And then they see new contractors coming in who, aren't as familiar with the building code. So they create bottlenecks for themselves in not knowing the building code. Another challenge identified by the code enforcement officers is their personal liability and just what it means for them when they sign their name with that certificate of occupancy or certificate of compliance. I mean, that's something that they don't take lightly, but they also know it's just part of that job, and our future code enforcement officers willing to do that, and that's part of the challenge. I don't know if it's more from the mayor supervisor side or the code enforcement officers, but it was identified that the residents have their own financial issues in dealing with complying with the code. So, I think we could explore their funding opportunities to help residents comply with any deficiencies that they have in bringing a building up to code. And then they also mentioned the interagency data sharing. So that is, there's sharing the building code information or the building plans with the assessment department, but then also having this, whether it's a consolidated or a consistent building permit form across municipalities, I think would help the contractors and anyone doing work within the county. So besides the code enforcement officer and the mayor supervisor roundtables, we also had 2 that were for community stakeholders. And so that included contractors and realtors, and we included INHS and a few others as part of that. And so they identified quite a number of challenges, and were not shy in their opinions, but also really respect the code enforcement community and know that they have hard jobs. So, I wanted to say that they recognize changes that have been made in different municipalities over the years, but they see that turnover is high. So that's a challenge in trying to get projects done. So a bunch of these are about the staffing issues. What happens when there's a new code officer? They find that there's a lack of confidence. And they also pointed to the changes in the uniform code and the energy code of just being hard to keep up with that. And in Tompkins County, there are 3 different energy codes that are in existence. So that's a challenge, excuse me. That's a challenge for the municipal or for the contractors to keep up with just a different energy code in different municipalities that they're working in. So that's a bit of a frustration to them, as well as a frustration with any redundancies. And what came up in this conversation was the short-term rental laws that not only are different across municipalities, but also, this was kind of the realtor side of things that they felt like if you enforce the parking or you enforce the noise ordinances, would a short-term rental law be necessary? So that was that opinion shared in that roundtable. And then they also realized that there have been some changes in how the Department of State shares the training that they do, and it's not as good as it used to be. So what is bubbling to the surface is, this list and more that the consultants have identified, and they're pulling more information out of the surveys and again, out of the roundtables, but, staffing, training, software tracking programs. I know that this group has talked a lot about the 911 addressing. So we're, looking what those options are and what could be a streamlined way to make that more efficient. The specialty inspectors, so whether that's electrical inspectors, and I think we all know Floyd Ferris works for practically all the municipalities as electrical inspector, or he's third party. And so are there more out there that we could be recruiting? Let's see, some of the other ideas with just prosecuting violations. I think that one's a little tricky to hand off to someone else to do, but is there a streamlined way to look at that? And we also talked about in some of the groups of, could there just be a registration or a training for contractors? So how do we make sure we have people in the community who know the building code and we can rely on them to do it? So I think there could be some not as stringent as like the licensing that the city of Ithaca does, but something less than that could be considered as part of this work that we're doing. So that's a brief overview, and I will take any questions or also offer if you came away from the roundtable and there are more ideas that you had, feel free to reach out to me and let me know, or the consultants as well, if there are thoughts that you want to throw into the hat for consideration for shared services.
Thank you, Darby. Questions, comments? Joel?
Well, my question was exactly to your last point, which is the work of this consultant timed so they can interface with the shared services panel?
I'll have to check in with Bridget on that and see like what the exact timing of that is, and see if there's anything that is rising to the surface that we should be considering in the short term for this year. It might not quite line up, but we can see. We'll check in on that.
Other comments, questions? Robert?
Darby, I realized that the supervisors, the mayors, and the code enforcement officers were involved in these roundtables. Will there be any further opportunity for other municipal officials to weigh in some future roundtable to offer their insight and their opinion?
I don't want to say no to that, but I don't know where it is on the schedule yet. I think it'd be more providing feedback from the municipalities with some of the draft documents coming out, so we can share those around and get feedback.
And follow up, was there any interest expressed in these roundtables for any kind of countywide consolidation of code enforcement, or was that more or less taken off the table?
That's pretty much been taken off the table. We haven't heard from, Mark would love it if we did countywide consolidation, but municipality of one isn't gonna make that happen. So it would have to be really a majority or most of you wanting to be part of that system.
I know, having gone out there and talked to constituents, one of the prime complaints right now is countywide assessment, which is something we've had for more than 50 years. We can't do anything about. And I just fear that countywide code enforcement would probably walk down that same path. So it's probably best to keep it still individual town by town.
Joel,
That said, I mean, the one of the things that came out of the electeds forum was that there's a considerable interest in having maybe a county backup because for many of the small municipalities, we've got no way to deal with the situation of either somebody quits or they get sick or for one reason or another they can't cover, and you can get behind in a hurry. And contractors rely on there being somebody available to do the inspections and keep things moving. And it would be really helpful if there was some sort of a county level backup.
Another direction would be shared services in which neighboring communities work out agreements. I know we've worked one out with the town of Ithaca, in which you start backup and maybe start sharing some of the work. And I think that's where you build up to a countywide thing, is if you get enough neighboring communities doing a shared service deal.
Right. And we've done that. I mean, Caroline and Danby have collaborated, but it's all informal. It'd be nice if there was some way of dealing with unexpected, when somebody gets sick and then where
Mark, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to chime in that a lot of the issues that I think were identified that Darby went over, like that are frustrations. I thought the feedback from the contractor community was really useful there, and so consistency among municipalities. So while maybe my own philosophy is we're not throwing anything off the table, but at least the solutions, at least it seems like some of the things we need to think about are do point to how do we do these things efficiently. How do we support each other? It is the New York State Building Code, and so how do we do this in a collaborative way that supports the goals? So just throw that in there.
Any other comments?
It's called the state uniform code, but the code is uniform, but its enforcement is not.
Other comments? Thank you, Darby.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to committee reports. Cynthia, I'm going to start with you before you disappear. Is that okay? Do you still have time?
I do. You're going to need to give me a second to pull up what I sent. I apologize.
Yeah, I should have. Anyway.
Okay. I found it. Here we go. So as you know, I am the chair of the Water Resources Council for Tompkins County. I also am a member of the City of Ithaca DWSP2 program. So I'll give a little bit update of what has happened in the last couple of months. At the March Water Resources Council meeting, we received a presentation from Jenna Durario from CCE with regards to the payment for ecosystem services. This is a voluntary program whereby funding, incentives, and assistance is harnessed from various state, municipal, and public-private partnerships, as well as carbon markets, and can be allocated to farmers and other parties who voluntarily participate and pay for practice or pay for performance programs that provide ecosystem benefits. For example, agricultural and forested land, which implement best management practices, will provide benefits to surrounding communities, and PES programs helps provide supports for their participation and engagement. At the February Water Resources Council meeting, we also received a presentation from Bill Capel and Stephanie Redmond on a proposal to monitor and provide long-term groundwater and water quality data for drinking water aquifer systems in Tompkins County. The current system of monitoring groundwater is limited to 2 wells per county, I believe, by the state, which provides some information but does not represent all the aquifers in the county. A working group has been created to continue to meet and discuss the data available to understand where our aquifer studies are and what benefits might be gleaned from expanding any kind of groundwater monitoring system. So that's currently being explored by the WRC members. I'm happy to report that the City of Ithaca Drinking Water Source Protection Plan program has an intermunicipal task force, which includes Dryden, Danby, Caroline, and Ithaca, and is looking at developing a draft model solar local law for stormwater protection to address stormwater issues. New York State has approved the DWSB2 program from utilizing and funding a consultant, Barton and LaJudas, to help in the creation of this local law. Also, the city DWSB2 is talking with the soil and water districts to determine how we can assist the Tompkins County Soil and Water District in moving stormwater management, stream stabilization, and bridge projects forward, as well as a presentation was made to the Dryden Conservation Advisory Board, which is going to result in a potential collaboration on a demonstration ditch project that Dryden is in the stages of planning. And just lastly, and I didn't include this in my report, but I'm thinking of it as we think about shared services. As chair of the Ithaca Area Wastewater Treatment Plant Board, you may have seen some news that we, members of the board, are considering different management models for the wastewater treatment plant, taking a look at that to provide some long-term stability and efficiencies in how we manage our wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you. I'm glad you were able to give your report and not me read it. So
Thank you.
questions? Mark?
I was having trouble unmuting, sorry. Cynthia, yeah, I was interested in well, that was a very interesting report. It was all of interest to me. The ditching project in Dryden, that sounds very interesting. You mentioned cooperative extension has a pay for performance for environmental services.
Payment for ecosystem services.
Ecosystem services, okay. So how does that work?
So basically, as I understand it, and I am also in the learning processes of this program, but we especially, perfect example, right? Ithaca is down gradient of the surrounding areas, and we really rely on the agricultural and forested areas around us. If they could institute best practices, we receive the benefit. So how, in a payment for ecosystem services program, which is voluntary, how do we support property owners from instituting best practices that would provide the benefit outside of their region? And this is one model that puts that forward. There are pilot programs. We're still in very early stages. And so this is being put together. And I believe there's 1 or 2 pilot programs that are being conducted in Tompkins County itself at this point, but we're in the beginning of this.
Okay, so it's in a formative stage.
Yes.
Okay, and that's being, is the Water Resources Institute doing that, or the cooperative extension, or?
The cooperative extension, Jenna
Okay.
Durario at CCE.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
And Mark, do you have a broadband report?
I guess I'd say yes and no. So I don't have any report from the county broadband. I haven't spoken to Nick. Yeah, I think they're still in a study or data acquisition phase, but I don't know for sure. So I would defer to Nick on that. And Caroline made the news this week. I got into the press, so we did get an award from the county. Thank you for the recovery funds to support a feasibility study on a municipal broadband in Caroline that would be perhaps building out or at least utilizing the efforts of Dryden. So we're just starting that process with the same firm and are very excited about that. And we've been struggling for a long time to figure out how to solve the rural broadband issue in Caroline. So I'll just mention that from my local perspective. So it could have, who knows, this could have ramifications for the rest of us. I don't know. I would hope so. So
anything, excuse me, anything else broadband related?
Not from me.
Okay, Kristen, do you have anything to report on cybersecurity, municipal information tech services?
Sure.
I'm
So
sorry, Caitlin.
it's fine. There's another, you know, Kristen Olson
I
also.
do.
She and I are both in the same field historically, so we get confused for each other all the time. Don't worry about it. I have talked to my co-conspirators on the committee, both directly, but we have not had an official meeting since our last meeting. Couple of things. Ulysses is actually getting its phase 1 assessment report back from the IT consultant that we hired to basically do an audit of our internal systems. And what we're intending to do, and it sounded like it may be of interest when the town supervisors met, that may be of interest or use to other towns, is to host a small Zoom session on the process that we went through, share the RFP that we used. We developed our RFP for cyber and IT security services in conjunction with recommendations from the county. So that was really useful. And it might be a boilerplate that other municipalities find useful as well. And that we did in response to effectively what the comptroller's office is using as their standard boilerplate for giving, when they can't find something financial to audit, they are going to audit your IT and security systems, and they have a standard boilerplate that we're responding to effectively. And so we were we'd be happy to host that and share what we're doing. I think out of that conversation, it was useful to talk to the other town supervisors, because there might be places where we can collaborate in terms of software or some possible shared services that we may reach out to the county for assistance on. For instance, the village, I hope I'm not speaking out of term, but I know the village of Trumansburg is at least considering going in a similar route as we are. And I think that that's a reflection of, well, not official shared services by any stretch. It is the direct result of shared conversation about these topics and the impact to municipalities. But I wanted to share a couple of resources that I found recently that I thought might be of use to everybody. The first one I'm going to share comes to us from the New York State Association of Counties, their cybersecurity resources, and they have a number of reports that were done in collaboration with their parallel entities at the town and village/city level. And they have some reports in there and some best practices that I found very useful. And as a result of having gone through that information, I was also made aware that New York State will actually, the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services will actually come do and it's something that we're now putting, Ulysses is now putting, we're thinking about putting in a request for them to do it. They'll actually come to your municipality. Actually, I gave you the things twice. Hold on, let me give you the same thing twice. They'll actually come to your municipality and do a 3-hour table exercise with you about how you would respond as an entity based on your policies and your procedures to different types of threats, to basically do a test run of your systems or your processes. And I thought that sounded that may be of interest to other municipalities as well as a useful exercise. So those links are in there.
Thank you, Caitlin. Questions for Caitlin? Okay, moving on to emergency planning and preparedness. Mark, says that's you also.
Sure, I'll start off and if Rorden wants to add anything in, that'd be great. So I guess I'm happy to report that Joe Milliman has been hired as the emergency services emergency response program manager for the county at Department of Emergency Response, and he's now will be working over the next year to or at least the next, so he'll be working to evaluate and develop a plan to address the emergency response issue countywide. So he's putting together a steering committee now, and they'll be meeting regularly. So so that's very exciting. This is the outgrowth of the work that our subcommittee has been doing for the last 3 years. So I'm excited to see to have Joe joining us and see what we learn and see what the action plan is going forward. And let's see, the other thing I'll mention is that we've mentioned, I reported before that there are companion bills for the state reimbursement model for emergency services that Rorden helps steward. Those are now in committee in the Senate and Assembly, and so we're thinking we'd like to perhaps for the next meeting have a resolution to the governor's office to support the timely evaluation and movement of those bills. So so that's my report, and I'll ask Rorden if he has anything he'd like to add. So.
No, nothing in particular. Ditto to what Mark said regarding the county's willingness to hire a position of EMS program manager, so we can try to take the lead a little bit in central New York as to how we're going to bolster the network of EMS response in particular. These bills, jumping ahead to what Mark mentioned second, these bills are essentially the same. I haven't read the entire text of this version, but they're essentially entirely the same as last year's bills that were introduced. Although I see that there are 20 co-sponsors on the Assembly side. That's a lot more than we had last year. But it is in the Health Committee. There was an attempt to include this in the governor's budget, but that was roundly shot down by the governor's office. So these are introduced bills, and we have to go the lobbying route. So I would actually love to see a resolution come out of TCOG supporting this, but I would also love a resolution coming out of TCOG to go to our legislature to encourage the Tompkins County legislature to themselves pass a resolution supporting this. And again, this feels like a multi-year effort, but to get to a tipping point where it can get the votes necessary to pass. And again, there seems to be some surprising resistance. I don't know why anything surprises me anymore. Some surprising resistance from the governor's office on anything to do with meaningfully assisting EMS from a financial standpoint. But first things first, if we can get the Assembly and Senate to get on board, then that'll be our next mountain to climb.
Shauna?
Yeah, I am happy to, if there's something that's drafted, I'm happy to send this right to public safety. I think what we're trying to do is submit these sooner than later. And I'd hate for it to get hung up in the process. So Rorden, if you want to send me over some information, I could draft it up. And Katrina, do you happen to know when public safety is next?
April 20th. April 20th.
I think
I
what
can
I
go
could
ahead.
actually do is probably a member filed, and we can, if it's all right with everyone, if there's buy-in from this group, I'm happy to bring it forward as a member filed in our next legislature meeting, the 4th of April.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Do you want to
Rorden?
vote? Do you want to
Thank
vote
you.
from this group?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
So,
Right.
Rorden, come up with some words on what we're voting on, that this TCOG board supports.
Thank you,
So
Shauna.
thinking.
Yeah.
Do you want to go on to the next report and give Rorden a chance to jot down?
Sure,
some
that
words?
makes sense. How about that, Rorden?
Sure.
Okay. So we'll come back to that. Energy. The Energy Committee did meet on March 2nd. Most of our time was devoted to a discussion about electrification and capacity issues, including transmission lines and substations. So some of the potential next steps are Terry Carroll volunteered to develop a memo that we could take up to our elected bodies and planning boards, laying out the situation. And there is some additional information we would like to get from each municipality to talk about future electric needs. So I may have to remind Terry that he agreed to do that, but look for a memo that we would share with you to take to your bodies and to share with your planning boards. There's very strong interest, and I haven't really followed up on this yet, but Shauna and who else is from the county here right now? There's very strong interest in developing a GIS map that municipalities can access of current electric capacities. I did talk to, we have a GIS person in the town of Ithaca, and he thought that there was some work that had started on that. So anyway, we want to see how that could come together without it being a huge imposition on anyone in particular. There is some modeling that's starting to happen. The city is doing some modeling about its future electric needs. So we may want to get a report on how they've gone about the modeling process to see how it informs a broader modeling aspect. We know that Siemens is working on a modeling presentation. So we've talked to Sarah Collada about potentially making a future presentation about modeling. Again, I think this is pretty specific to the city. But I think that NYSEG and Anvar Grid are also starting to do some modeling. So there's starting to be some things around modeling that we want to bring to this group when there's something to actually share. So those are a few things that we want to keep track of. Some other folks were on that committee. Anyone want to chime in? I'm going to have Bob Lynch take notes next time. He does a much better job of taking notes than Rod Howe does. But I always say at the beginning of a meeting, if you're expecting deep notes, don't rely on me. So, Joel, can you think of anything else to mention?
No, I think it covered it pretty well.
Any questions?
I will say that was a very informative session we had.
Yeah, it's great that the county, oh, by the way, there will be some things that it's not really because the energy, I mean, we may have seeded the idea, but down the road, I think the county is going to come up with a electric vehicle demonstration day that will be geared to municipalities. They now have a variety of EV equipment. So Haley and Terry, I think, are willing to work on that. So stay tuned on that. We didn't want to push them too hard, but I do think that that will happen. Mark.
Hey, Rod, this spurred it's related to what I brought up last time, the charging station model, business model that Green Spot was the name of the place. But it, you know, like talking at a session at the Association of Towns, there are a lot of companies out there that have different models, things like that. And so I just wanted to put out there, it'd be really helpful if there was a clearinghouse or an information place for understanding the differences of these different providers. So I'll just toss that out there. Maybe yeah, and I know, yeah, so.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So other questions or comments? I don't know. Robert, is there a transportation report?
Well, briefly, I can tell you that 1 month ago today, and as you know, TCAT board meets the same time that TCOG does. So I was able to sample the meeting that occurred a month ago on a Thursday. And it was an upbeat meeting. As Scott Vanderpool said regarding the state of TCAT, TCAT is moving toward a better place. It's not really the place they'd like to be post-pandemic. The problem is they had the problem with shortage of drivers and a shortage of available buses because of breakdowns. They had to curtail their schedule. Because they curtail their schedule, their ridership decreases compared to pre-pandemic. Nonetheless, it's up this year compared to last. He said that ridership was up 31%, 23 over 22. That's just for the month of January. And the rural was up, I can't believe this, 42.9%, but he said. And it was an upbeat meeting. They said that some January service was reduced due to equipment and labor shortages, but fewer service reductions were necessary in January 23 than in 22 in December 22. And that ridership reductions continued in early January due to bus and operator shortages. But thanks to the effort of the maintenance team, the number of buses available each day continued to climb in the last 2 weeks of January. They presented a good graph that showed the percentages of completed trips to missed trips. And over the course of the month of January, the percentage of trips completed compared to total trips kept increasing. So it was an upbeat meeting. We're not out of the woods yet, and they're hoping that over time they can get back into shape. But that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark?
Great. Thanks, Bob, for your brief report. That was great. And that's just really good news. I'm delighted to hear that, especially for the rural ridership. So
thank you.
Do you know, are the, just a general question, are the electric buses working out well?
I believe they're working out well. There was no talk of any breakdowns or anything like that. Of course, they're very expensive to buy and they wish they had more of them. And the long range goal is to completely electrify their fleet, but that's way down the road. And there are no complaints about them yet.
Great. Thank you.
Are there any other? I'm sorry.
Can I just add one quick thing? You might be interested to know that we've eliminated the fare in Ulster County for ridership.
Mhm.
And it's increased bus ridership exponentially. And if anybody wants information on that, we can send that over to you, how we did it. We did seed funding with ARPA funds, and then there's some other complicated way that they're taking care of that through our, it's called UCAT. You have TCAT, we have UCAT. So happy to share that information if you're interested.
So that,
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll give you my card.
Yep.
Perfect.
Wow,
Other-
that's very exciting.
Other reports? Then moving on to, so there's a dedicated group.
Well,
that's
we need to
been
come
working-
back. We need to come back to Gordon.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Roard. Oh, my gosh.
So I found the resolution. You may recall we adopted one back at the end of 2020 or early 2021, which encouraged the legislature to look into this model. So Shauna, if you'd like, I'm editing it to make it current and relevant, but I could just email that to you if you'd like.
That's
as
great.
a template.
Yeah, sure. And I think
and
what
then
I'll
Rod-
do is I'll ask Katrina to help us with a resolution. Send it to this group. If I could get everyone's okay, and Roran, if you can make sure that I have the right facts on there before I send it to the legislature, I think that would make sense.
Sure. Yeah, I'll send the draft resolution so Katrina can use it as a template. So Rod, I don't know if you want the multiple whereas version or something simpler
Something
for
simple.
our purposes.
Something simpler that you can refer to a longer version. I think this is just a chance to say, yes, there's strong support from this group to send that to the county with the minor changes that are going to happen.
Can we reiterate our last proposal from 2022, you said? Just say we're supporting that and wanting the
Well,
county.
it's from 2020 and it was before any bills were written. So I'm rewriting it now so that it references the current bills that are in Assembly and Senate. A lot of the language is similar.
I'm just wondering if
what
we
I'm
could have a
writing.
simple one referring to that.
Title.
Just referring to that and saying updated for the bills that have been added. And then you and Shauna can put together something for the county that's got all the detail in it. So we can move forward, support the
Sure.
idea, and you guys can put together the details.
When is our next meeting?
Couple of months in May.
So then maybe whatever we end up drafting, we can have our version. We could pass as well in order to send that along to this Assembly and Senate. But for today, I guess I would just simply move that the Tompkins County Council of Governments supports New York Assembly Bill A 1091 and Senate Bill 1852, which would create a CHIPS-style state funding subsidy for public and not-for-profit EMS agencies, and that we call upon the Tompkins County Legislature to pass a resolution of support for the same.
And so, Roy,
Second.
you're moving that. So Mark
Correct.
seconds. Any questions before we vote?
That was perfect, Gordon. So,
All those
Nice.
in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? It's unanimous. Okay. So it doesn't sound like it needs to come back to this group at all. Is that how I'm reading the situation?
Right.
We'll find out in May.
I think that's correct. So Rorden will forward the information from the previous resolution to Shauna and she'll take it from there, right?
Well,
Sounds good.
Great.
Now, it might also be helpful for us, for the other governments to also pass resolutions of support, which all we need is a template. So if you get it together for the county level, we could, share it and we could pass it in the towns as well.
Once I get one ready for the legislature agenda, I'll go ahead and share it with the entire TCOG group.
Great.
Thank you.
What I'll send you, Katrina, I'm going to rewrite this for the village. So I'll just send you our resolution for the village and then you can
Okay.
doctor it any way you like.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Roden. Any other reports? Okay,
Bob.
now.
I would-
turning-
Yep, there's one. Bob?
I'm sorry.
Rod?
Yeah.
I would just suggest that Rorden send to the TCOG members a copy of whatever he's putting together for the village, so that our individual town boards and village boards might adopt supportive resolutions as well.
Right, exactly.
Sounds good. Okay, bylaws. So there's a small committed group
Yeah.
that's been working on revising the bylaws. We're
Ably,
in a-
ably chaired by Rod Howe. Yes.
yeah, but who's like sort of backed away like, okay, Joel and Joe, I don't really care.
We do.
Mark
Rod, would
has
you like
weighed
to-
in.
Rod, would you
So
like Taylor to bring up the draft version?
I don't think it's, we're gonna set the table. I don't think it's necessary. What we just
Okay.
want to, well, I'm gonna turn to Joel and Joe, because there are a couple of things that we will rely on this body where there's a bit of a difference of opinion to try to move forward. I think then the goal is to bring you one draft. Joel, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, or Joe, one draft version. If we have a brief discussion today, we know it has to be sent out a month before the meeting. We know that when we do vote on this, we have to be in person. So I know originally we were talking about May. If it doesn't work out for May, then we can talk about an in-person meeting for July. So Joel and Joe, do you want to mention what are a couple of the key issues that we're still trying to resolve? Issues is too big of a word. It's really, well, anyway, who wants to go first?
I don't know if it's too big a word. We had two things that we wanted to address primarily, and one was the fact that the bylaws doesn't accommodate remote attendance, and the other had to do with the addition of the county as a member, which wasn't actually not in the bylaws as they were previously constituted. When we started on this process, it changed the way the group sort of thinks of itself. It was a council of governments, and the participants in that were characterized as municipalities. Well, the county's not a municipality, so then say, well, the county's not a municipality. How do we think of ourselves? And then the bylaws are structured in a way that the municipalities, as they were called, send delegates, which is this group, and they're characterized as members. Well, if the municipalities that send their delegates to this group also call themselves members, because it refers to member municipalities. We got two sets of members. We got member municipalities, and then we got members of this group. Joe pointed out that that's kind of murky thinking, and suggested that we should think of the group of governments as members, and then the ones delegated to represent them could be called representatives. So we have dueling versions of this, is what I would say. I wrote it up with the word membership being retained essentially for both. Joe wrote up an alternative where the group of the constituent municipalities or constituent governments, as they're not all municipalities, are the members, and then this is a group then that becomes a council of representatives rather than a membership group. So it's a philosophical difference. It's not hugely important, but it would be nice to know whether people, people here assembled would rather see themselves as members of TCOG or as representatives of the governments that sent them here. And then we are essentially a council of representatives if you do that.
I'd just like to add that some of the clarification also comes in how representatives drop off. So if someone drops off of their town board for some reason, they're not the member, the town board's the member, and it clarifies that the town board is the one that chooses the next person. It also could extend to if the town board doesn't like the way I'm representing the town at this body, the town board can choose to send somebody else. So it emphasizes that the membership is with the town board, not with the person who's been sent here as a member. It kind of brings that, I think it clarifies who's really the member and what our role is in this room.
So have we clarified that decision that we're looking for some feedback on? I would say that the rest of the bylaw changes, they weren't major. They were,
No, we can work it out. I mean, that's up
cleaning some
to,
things up. So that's
unfortunately,
why
it
we
didn't, we
thought-
didn't get it all together before this
All
meeting, but with one more meeting, I think we could probably hash out,
right.
thing.
There are a
What would
lot
be
of
helpful, I'm sorry.
There are a lot of clerical things. We don't allow for committees in the bylaw specifically. We don't allow for electronic attendance in the bylaws at all. The county isn't actually named as a voting member in the bylaws. There's a lot of clerical things that I don't think there's any question about. We just need to make those changes. This is the only real philosophical, how do we want to word it? Do we want to word it with that kind of ambiguous what a member is, or do we want to make it really clear municipalities are members, we're representatives?
And Mark is one of the committee members who has weighed in. I haven't weighed in on this, so Mark.
Yes.
I'm a minor representative of the committee, but I correct me if I'm wrong, but in drafting the language for remote attendance, I thought I saw that for voting on matters that remote attendees, are they allowed to vote or not?
Yeah.
They are.
Right.
Okay.
Right now, the bylaws are kind of vague on that, except for bylaw amendments have to be in person.
Right. Well, there are a couple of provisions in there that require in person. And amending the bylaws is the primary one. So in order to make any changes, we'd have to have an in-person meeting, which at the last meeting, we all agreed with, we would try to get a proposal together. And then we would actually vote on it in the May meeting, which would have to be in person in order to do that. So that part's straightforward.
I guess that brings another question to this board. Do they want to maintain bylaw changes as an in-person only, or do we want to remove the in-person for everything?
What I wrote in was we removed it for everything.
Say that again, Joel.
So in the draft of which was circulated, I took it out as being required to be in person. So we wouldn't have to be in person for anything.
Yeah, I'd certainly be in favor of that. I think we all said it'd be nice to meet in person once in a while, but that could be at our choosing rather than it being dictated by something like bylaw. My guess is we won't be changing the bylaws I think it's been a while since the bylaws were changed.
2016, I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I think given the slow change in open meetings law and, what's allowed, even though we're not a, official, but I support the full that remote attendance is a legitimate and way of attending in every way. So.
And Mark, did you want to say where you came down on this philosophical discussion?
I don't know. I go back and forth. I
I was
really
gonna say, Mark come down on both sides of this.
Yeah, I did. So I really think it's semantic. It's what you're comfortable with.
So Ronnie.
I support the member for the municipal participation and representative for the individual members from each of the municipalities. And I also agree with Mark that I would like to see remote voting allowed for all votes, including the bylaws.
Okay. Others? Robert?
And I think that Joe's idea about having us, the people who are sent by our municipalities, being representatives is a very good idea. And I think that makes a distinction between the member, which should be the town or the village, and the delegate that they send, which should be the representative. And I have no problem with remote attendance, either for normal business or for bylaw changes.
That was Joe's idea, by the way, but if everybody's on board with it, we'll go with it.
Dan.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I can only imagine that's what was meant originally when we put these bylaws together, that we're not here as individually elected to TCOG. We're representing the interest of our municipalities and our constituents.
Anyone else want to
weigh in on this thorny issue?
It sounds like we're heading toward a certain direction, so.
Yes, it does.
Does that cover all the questions you had, Joe and Joel?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other issues are pretty clear, and I don't know that we need guidance on. I think we can agree in committee, we probably would to have something we can bring back. We can, thinking about the timeline, that month is actually something that I wrote in. The current bylaws don't only say that the proposed changes have to be shared in advance, without saying how long in advance. So we can meet as a committee, work up a draft and float it. And then if anybody's got any problems with it, we can modify it before it comes to a vote at that May meeting.
We can recommend friendly amendments then, or changes.
Yes, right, yeah.
But Joe, so because we're still operating under the current bylaws, that's why we're gonna have to meet in person.
Yes, we
Yeah,
have to meet in person to make it.
So maybe we can do the May meeting.
Oh, yeah, we can.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
right. As long as this group is okay with, we'll go back and revise, float it by everybody. We got after all 2 months. We could even meet the 1 month deadline if we wanted to. And then if people are okay with bringing that to a vote without having to come back here to be reviewed before going to a vote, that's the only thing that gets forfeited here by not having decided everything today.
But they really are, as Joe said, more clerical. I think we're bringing to you where we got stuck.
Yes, exactly. Right.
So anyone else want to weigh in? Otherwise,
Excuse me, Rod, when is the May meeting?
It would be May 25th.
Okay, I will be away until the 23rd, so I think I can make the 25th.
Right, you may be critical to our 2/3, our quorum for a 2/3 vote.
Yeah, I think we ought to poll people as to whether we can get 2/3 there before we
I was
say
gonna recommend that.
in advance, because if we're not going to get 2/3, let's move it to July and not just keep scheduling them and hoping we get 2/3.
We
I
can
will
create,
actually be out of town that day. Sorry.
Well, yeah, Johnny, you wouldn't get the vote anyway.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the bylaws don't give the county a vote.
Well, that's
what
great.
That's what we want to change. Yeah.
Carry on.
We've been treating you as a member, and we'd like to have you as a member, and that's one of the reasons of changing the bylaws.
So maybe when we send out the minutes, we can ask folks, can you verify that you will be there in person on May 20, whatever you just said? How many currently, just quick show of hands, can be there in person that date? I know that doesn't give us the 2/3, but that's quite a few right there. So
good start. Yeah.
That's good. So anything else about bylaws? So I really do want, it's really been Joel and Joe who have focused on this primarily. Because at one point I just said, I don't really care.
So Rod, can you pull our committee together to make those final changes?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
Mark, do you want us to include you?
Sure, that'd be
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
Okay, good. What else what do we have as next meeting agenda items? I think a couple things got mentioned.
Bylaw changes?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, right. By then we should have, I'm kind of curious to know where Nick Hemholt stands with, with the study that they did, and what are the next steps?
Let's invite him, I would suggest.
Yeah.
So
broadband.
In Darby, let's see, given Darby's timeline, there's probably going to be an update about that as well, the codes study. And certainly if folks think of things, just let Joel or I know. Because oftentimes we stop thinking about this until we get about a week in advance. We're like, oh, what's on the agenda? Anything else that we need to talk about today? Seeing nothing, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Take care, everyone.
All right, thank you.